never forget that night, Dusty. Flash of guns, shouts of murdering men, and the courage of my dad.
Paperback Warrior has returned. Thanks so much for listening to our first few episodes. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on our show, and we really appreciate all the support. It's been a lot of fun for Tom and I. It's been a learning experience, podcasting, joining the podcasting world. We've taken a real deep dive into some books, authors, and the industry as it was, decades ago. The show, of course, is now featured on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to subscribe. We're streaming on Spreaker. That's hard to say, isn't it? YouTube. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Radio Play, Castbox, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. Of course, you can always check paperbackwarrior.com every Monday for the newest episodes. And last episode, Tom mentioned his book shopping in Detroit. And I think I mentioned it before, maybe early episode, but Tom really gets around with his day job. And I want to ask you, any notable purchases last week? Any trading going on behind the scenes that I should know about? I know my borrowing credit's still good, right?
Your borrowing credit's fine. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 4. This is Tom. The notable purchases and reading right now, and these will evolve into paperbackwarrior.com reviews in the future, is I got the 5 books of the Joaquin Hawks series of spy novels by Bill S. Ballinger that were written in the maybe 65 and 66. It's a Native American CIA operative kind of riding the James Bond wave. Most of the adventures appear to happen in Southeast Asia, kind of in the run-up to the Vietnam War. And I'm about halfway through reading the first one right now, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit. The book I was most excited to acquire, and I got a bunch of books in the series thanks to a trade with a friend of mine named Nathan up in Wisconsin, was the Malco series, which were books originally written in French by Gérard de Villiers. There were 200 books written in French. I think only 10 or 15 available in English, maybe as many as 20. It's going to be significant. You're going to be learning a lot more about Malco and the pop culture because actor Michael Fassbender is starring and producing in an adaptation of the book number 8 in the series, in the American numbering in the series, Checkpoint Charlie. And so sometime in the next couple of years, you're going to see a Malco movie coming out, and it's a really good series. I've always seen the series around, never thought much of it. And book number 1, I think, has terrible cover art. Some of the later books have better cover art, and some of them have photo art. But the book number 1, I was just blown away. I wasn't really excited about reading a book translated from the French, but man, oh man, it was really something. But we'll talk about that some other day.
Well, boys, I've been trying to meet up with you for some time.
Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about... we're going to be doing reviews of a book called Man from War, and that's W-A-R, and the phenomenon of Man from U.N.C.L.E, rip-off sexy spy novels. Eric's going to be reviewing a book called You'll Get Yours, which has been reprinted by Starkhouse under the author's real name, William Ard. And I'm going to be talking a little bit right now about Manhunt Magazine. Manhunt Magazine was published from 1952 to 1967, and the idea behind the magazine was going to be super hard-boiled, kind of blood-on-the-knuckles, short fiction, and it was originally going to be titled Mickey Spillane Mystery Magazine, in the same way that Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine or Shel Scott Mystery Magazine or Man from U.N.C.L.E Mystery Magazine. It was a digest publication, and however, there was some issue with Mickey Spillane's literary contract that they couldn't name a magazine after him. And anyway, the stories in Manhunt Magazine are just amazing. It was the best stuff out there as far as like really, really good hard-boiled stuff. They weren't always necessarily mysteries, although there were some mysteries in there. I mean, this was crime stuff. More often than not, the protagonists of these stories were the bad guys committing the crime itself.
I've never seen any of those old magazines in the stores, other than one time I found an issue of Stag, which I was astounded to find, but one of the store owners here in Florida said that that the paper on these things were just too cheap to allow for any kind of longevity. So I don't know. Have you ever found a Manhunt magazine in the wild?
I've never actually seen one in the wild, and I've been everywhere. I did go a couple of years ago to the Windy City Pulp and Paper Convention, which had tons of magazines and paperback books there in the dealer's room, and there were copies there, but they were sealed in plastic. They were crazy expensive. I've actually bought a few copies of Manhunt off of eBay, and I found a decent price for them. But most of the ones on eBay are really expensive. It was explained to me by Stephen Mertz, the famous author, that the Manhunts that have true value are the ones with the yellow spine from early in the 1950s. By the time we got into the 60s, sales had really gone down for Manhunt magazine, and they had white spines. And of course, those are the ones I bought and probably overpaid for, and the stories in them are nothing particularly special. Manhunt Magazine, though, was really the creation of a guy named Scott Meredith, who was a literary agent at the time, who represented really a who's who of crime fiction in the 1950s. And he used this as a conduit to promote his author's works. And in 1958, Perma Books, a small publisher, released a paperback called The Best from Manhunt, edited by Scott Meredith and his brother Sidney. It had 13 short stories from Manhunt Magazine, with an introduction by Scott Meredith and Sidney Meredith. I spent a fortune getting this paperback together, and the copy I have, I don't think would last through one reading. But there's huge news going on right now because Stark House Publications, a great publisher based in California, is putting out The Best of Manhunt, a 2019 anthology which contains 384 pages and essays from Manhunt Magazine and about Manhunt Magazine, with 39 short stories. What they did was they basically took the 1958 Permabooks book with the 13 short stories, reprint that in its entirety, and then add on an additional 26 stories. And so it's an amazing book. In fact, I would argue that it is the most important crime fiction anthology maybe ever published.
Wow.
Listen to the authors. Listen to this kind of murderer's row of authors. Evan Hunter, who's also Ed McBain, Fletcher Flora, Frank Kane, Frederick Brown, Mickey Spillane, David Goodis, John D. McDonald, Gil Brewer, Harlan Ellison, Talmadge Powell, Donald Westlake, and many, many more. So it's just, and plus there's essays by, by Lawrence Block, wrote an essay on his experience. There's also a Lawrence Block story, a Richard Deming story. There's a Jonathan Craig story, Harry Whittington. There's an introduction by a guy named Jeff Vorzimmer, who did a great job sort of explaining the history of Manhunt Magazine, some of the stuff that happened with the publication could have been a crime story unto itself. Barry Maltzberg wrote an essay, and it reprints also the Scott and Sidney Meredith introduction there. So you got basically 4 sizable nonfiction articles about Manhunt Magazine and 39 short stories. It's the anthology is being reviewed this week on Paperback Warrior. You want to check it out. It's difficult for me to review a short story anthology. So what I did is I just picked a bunch of stories that I liked from it. I picked stories by Richard Deming, Jonathan Craig, Harry Whittington, and Lawrence Block as sort of samples, and reviewed those stories specifically while kind of hyping the book itself. But man, oh man, you got to check this out. This is one of the greatest things I've ever seen. And it's going to save me a fortune because going out and seeking old copies of Manhunt Magazine is incredibly expensive. Many of these stories have been reprinted elsewhere in giant fiction anthologies, but this is the only place I've ever seen that has one-stop shop for stories, and I am praying that it sells well. So Stark House is motivated to do a volume 2 and a volume 3, and literally just save me the trouble of seeking out these stories because they're just outstanding.
When's this book out?
I think it comes out July 27, end of July. So it's available on Amazon now. You can pre-order it, but the book is being released on end of July. So I think pretty much coinciding with this podcast being broadcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this episode, the air date is going to be around the time that comes out. And you can get it a digital copy, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I have to think so. That the Greg Shepard, who runs Stark House, he's been really good about putting these things out digitally as well. But it's actually it's a beautiful book. It reprints a lot of the covers of Manhunt Magazine, which are these lush, crime fiction paperback style paintings on the cover of the giant omnibus. And so it's the type of thing that you want to own.
Okay. Well, if you do check out Tom's review online, there's a link in there to the book on Amazon. If you follow that link, it'll go through the Paperback Warrior podcast link, which will throw us a little bit of cash, so we appreciate that.
Okay, good. Let's go on to the reviews. Tell me about this William Ard book you read.
So going back to Starkhouse, Starkhouse created a subsidiary called Black Gat Books. It's been around since 2015, and Starkhouse has pushed out about 20 books under this line so far. There's some really great authors featured in this line, like Harry Whittington, Ori Hitt, Ven Packer, Henry Kane, Lou Cameron, and Ed Lacey. The book I'm about to talk about is called You'll Get Yours from 1952, and it's by William Ard. It's a Black Gat book number 16. It was released in August of 2018. I love Black Gat books because they're in the size of the old paperbacks, and they've got numbers on them. So I think they're up to maybe number 22 now. So this one's a number 16. They look great on your shelf if you put them in numerical order. William Ard is a real tragedy. His career it came abruptly to an end at the early age of 37. He died in 1960. William Ard wrote under a variety of pseudonyms. Probably the one that's the most prevalent is Jonas Ward. Under the Ward name, he created the beloved hero Buchanan, a great Western series. He authored a total of 6 of the Buchanan books, and they were so good that the series was ghostwritten for seemingly decades afterwards. I think, Tom, it ran all the way up into the 80s.
There's a lot of them. I've seen them around.
Yeah, there's a ton of those things. But along with Westerns, Ard wrote 2 novels under the name Thomas Wills. Both starred private investigator Barney Glines. The character first appeared in this book, You'll Get Yours, and then again in the sequel, Mine to Avenge, in 1955. Thankfully, You'll Get Yours is available at an affordable price as this reprint. Mine to Avenge is a rare commodity and is priced accordingly. I don't make that kind of money, so I'm just waiting for Tom to purchase it. And he probably will. And my credit's still good at his library, so I'm ecstatic. So right up front, I'm going to say that Ard definitely does not pull any punches with this novel. There's a scene towards the end where these criminals are holding down a drugged-out prostitute while an assailant empties a revolver into her face. I mean, we're talking like 70s and 80s stuff, like Death Dealer or Butcher.
And this was written in the 1950s with a scene like that.
Yes, this was 1952.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's a lot of modern writing within Ard's narrative. The story features an aspiring actress named Kylie St. George. She's about to appear in her debut theatrical film, but the problem is that she's just inherited a fortune from her father, which also includes $100,000 in diamonds. My understanding back then, and this is really kind of odd to think about, but back then, consumers wouldn't necessarily flock to a new actress if they realized that she was uber wealthy. It seems really silly now, but I guess back then that was the knee-jerk response to a new female actress.
Everybody liked the rags to riches story, the idea of this unknown girl from the Midwest who's going to be a big star.
Yeah, they didn't want to support someone who had money to begin with, I guess. So that's the idea. But I'm totally suspending my belief when it's unveiled that Kylie carries her fortune in diamonds around in her luggage. So inevitably, this is a crime novel, so the crime is that the jewelry is eventually stolen. Her press agent hires Barney Glines to find the thief while suppressing the fact that Kylie is absolutely loaded. But the interesting part about this is, and this is about the middle part of the book, once the diamonds are recovered, the narrative really expands into Barney Glines chasing a whole other problem that Kylie is involved in. And I'm not going to ruin it for you, but I will say that what we see today with the TMZ sex tapes and leaked nudie photos and things like that are very similar to what Kylie runs into in 1952. It's just a different media format. So again, a lot of modern writing of what we see today was put into this novel back in 1952. It was a lot of fun to read. I'm a fan of Ard's writing with Buchanan, and he brings that same rugged approach to this book. It's got his tongue-in-cheek humor, which a lot of times Buchanan displays. If you love your noir crime to feature extortion, jealousy, and, a little romance, you really can't beat this novel. And again, it's very affordable thanks to Black Cat Books. Now if I can just get my greedy paws on the sequel. Tom, you're going to buy it, right?
Well, I think I've learned my lesson from spending a fortune on these books, and then Starkhouse puts them out already. So that was a review of You'll Get Yours by William Ard, which has been reprinted by Black Gat Books and is available on Amazon. You can also see Eric's review on paperbackwarrior.com, which has a purchase link at the bottom. So I want to move on to a general discussion and then a review. I want to talk about the impact of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV show and how it impacted literary fiction at the time with a lot of copycat novels. So Man from U.N.C.L.E. was a TV show. I think probably the late 1960s. I don't have the actual dates here for the Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV show in front of me in my notes, but I know it was late 60s. The premise was that U.N.C.L.E., it was an acronym for something long and complicated, United Network for Crime and Law Enforcement. But the conceit was that it was a American spy guy and a Soviet spy guy teaming up in this global agency to fight bad guys, many of which were with an agency, a bad guy agency called Thrush. I never really watched the TV show. It was kind of before my time. It was they remade into a movie, which I thought was actually pretty bad, starring that Army Hammer guy. But the books, I think, are fascinating. What they did was they issued a line of books. There were 23 original novels in the Man from U.N.C.L.E. book series, and they got a real who's who of authors from that era to write these books. And they weren't just adapting teleplays or screenplays. They basically were writing books in the Man from U.N.C.L.E. universe. And
sorry to interrupt you, but didn't Harry Whittington basically land his name in the publishing universe with the Man from U.N.C.L.E. novel that he did? He should have been I don't know, super wealthy just from that one book. I mean, he wrote a ton of books, but that one seemed like to be the most profitable.
Well, here's the deal, right? So the very first book was The Thousand Coffins Affair. All the books end with affair. That was Man from U.N.C.L.E. #1 novel by Michael Avallone, who is a great mystery writer, wrote a lot of different stuff, did some TV adaptation work. He wrote a great mystery series called the Ed Noon series that went on forever. But I think his most successful book was that book #1, The Thousand Coffins Affair. I think at the same time they had ordered up Harry Whittington to write the second book of the series called The Doomsday Affair that was published in 1966. Here's the catch. I believe, and I know for a fact that this was Harry Whittington's best-selling book. I think it was probably Michael Avallone's best-selling book as well. The problem is they were published as a work-for-hire deal, where they were both given $2,000 to write these books, and they got no residuals, and they don't own the rights to the books. Anyway, the books become gangbuster successes, selling millions of copies. They're really easy to find out there in the wild and used bookstores even today because so many were printed. And so Harry Whittington, after having toiled away writing for all those years, just cranking out crime novels and westerns and books under pseudonyms, finally has the bestseller he deserves, but he only gets $2,000 for it. He doesn't own the rights to the book, and I think it drove him a little bit crazy. Harry Whittington ended up, his spirit was broken. He ended up going to work for the Department of Agriculture, writing reports on rural electrification, which I suspect are probably the most hard-boiled reports that the Department of Agriculture has ever had written. He was still writing other things at the time. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV series, the novels were so successful, a digest magazine was created which had basically short stories that might be of interest. It was Man from U.N.C.L.E. magazine, but each digest magazine had a novella, usually probably about a 30 or 40 or 50 page novella in the Man from U.N.C.L.E. universe, which is weird. The novels were all written, and you could see who the authors' names are in the novels. However, the novellas in the digest were all written under the house name of Robert House Davis. And so there's websites out there that tell you who wrote what. Harry Whittington actually wrote a couple of them, and we reviewed one called, I think it was The Thousand Coffins Affair. No, that was the Michael Avallone one. I can't remember the name of the Harry Whittington one that we reviewed. But
Doomsday Affair?
No. Doomsday Affair was the novel. There's one that we reviewed on the site. I can't remember the name of it. It was like a Doc Savage book in the Harry Whittington, written by Harry Whittington in the Man from U.N.C.L.E. universe. The name escapes me, but if you click on the Harry Whittington link inside Paperback Warrior, you can see it. But Dennis Lyons, who went on to write stuff, and John Jakes, who became a best-selling mainstream author, also wrote at least one of the novellas there. So anyway, so this is all just background for where I'm going with this. So you got Man from U.N.C.L.E., a huge literary success. And then, of course, the copycats come about. And so there are a bunch of copycat series that came out that were sort of in the sexy spy genre, that with kind of nymphomaniac heroes and women heroes also. One series was Lady from Lust. And every one of these things, Lust is L-U-S-T with periods after it. It's some silly acronym. You had The Man from Stud, S-T-U-D. The Man from Orgy. I've dipped into some of these, and none of them are very good. I'm looking here on your screen. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. book we reviewed on the site was The Ghost Rider's Affair. And if you're a fan of Doc Savage and Man from U.N.C.L.E., Harry Whittington really brings those two things together in that novella. The problem with the U.N.C.L.E. books is that none of them have been reprinted or digitized in any legal format because they're owned by MGM or whoever the studio is that owns Man from U.N.C.L.E. It's the intellectual property of the TV shows, and it's still very much an alive intellectual property because they just made that movie a couple years ago. We interrupt this broadcast for a very special message. Hello, everybody. This is Tom, your co-host. In the next segment, I speak at length singing the praises of a company called New Ebook Library. And I discuss some of the books that New Ebook Library has published. Unfortunately, after the time where I made this recording and the time of the release, New Ebook Library has gone out of business, and none of their books are available digitally anymore, anywhere. So while I stand by my endorsement of the original paperbacks from which the ebooks were created, I'm afraid I have to rescind the idea that a 99-cent ebook from New Ebook Library is something that you should pursue because it's impossible. So anyway, so go out and buy the paperbacks I'm about to talk about and have a wonderful day, and I apologize for the confusion. Carry on back to our regularly scheduled show. Anyway, so I want to shift gears right now into an actual review of a book that was marketed as a Man from U.N.C.L.E. ripoff, but man, this book was so much more. The series was a 3-book series called Man from War, W-A-R. And WAR stands for Weapons Analysis and Research Incorporated. It was Man from War Incorporated. The first book in the series was called Mission Third Force. The series was written by a guy named Michael Kurland, K-U-R-L-A-N-D, and the first book is reviewed this week on paperbackwarrior.com. It was a fantastic series. I'll tell you a little bit about the book in a second, but it's important to know that there is a new book company out there, a new publisher called New Ebook Library, which is a godsend. They're republishing old books from the 1950s and 60s for 99 cents a book on Kindle. It's run by a guy named David Whitehead, who many of you may know as Ben Bridges, who was a famous author. Yeah, wrote a lot of Westerns and
Piccadilly Publishing.
Yeah, he's the guy who behind Piccadilly Publishing. And so I don't know what's become of Piccadilly Publishing, but they were reprinting a lot of great old books, mostly Westerns, but some non-Westerns, often by British authors. But I know Len Levinson's books were also, the Sargent series was republished by them. Anyway, his new venture is New Ebook Library, and he puts really nice covers. I think he gets Tony Macero to do a lot of his covers of these digital ebooks, and the reprinting old books. You don't have to go out and look in used bookstores for Man from War, Inc. #1 by Michael Kurland. You can spend 99 cents and get this book online. And their catalog of books that they're bringing out new ones are just outstanding. I'm just totally in love with this company. Anyway, the idea behind the Man from War series is that there's a hero by the name of Peter Carthage, who's very much kind of, if Sherlock Holmes was a spy, it would be Peter Carthage, which makes sense because Kurland wrote a bunch of books about in the Sherlock Holmes universe about Moriarty, Sherlock Holmes's nemesis. The book Mission Third Force came out in 1967. The idea is that there's this company called War Incorporated that's supposed to be a defense contractor. Peter Carthage is one of 3 people in the firm with the title of Expediter. And in this first book, he's sent out to a fictional Southeast Asian kingdom called Bonne Terre, a former French colony in Indonesia. What the author did is he basically took the colonial history of Vietnam and superimposed it over a Thailand-style constitutional monarchy that's having problems with commies up in the north, and he needs to go investigate it. What's really fun about the series is that War Incorporated is supposed to be just training and supplies for their host nation, and Carthage is not supposed to be firing shots at bad guys, but inevitably in these adventures he gets sucked into the conflict. And so it's a bit of a mystery to find out who the bad guys are. It's a war novel because there's plenty of plenty of that stuff, but he's also very much a spy novel. And so the first book was absolutely terrific. It's also a hilarious book, but not in like the cartoonish way that like The Lady from Orgy is. It's just very clever wisecracks in it, sarcastic remarks made by Carthage. There's sex scenes in the book, but nothing particularly graphic. I just really loved the book 1 of the series. I have books 2 and 3, which cost me 99 cents each, sitting on my Kindle, and I'm going to be reading and reviewing them soon. So that's my review, and I think that brings us toward the end of the episode.
Yeah, not only the end of the episode, but also the end of July. We did 4 reviews, or 4 episodes, I should say, this month. And this week you'll have 5 reviews showing up on the paperbackwarrior.com site. And this month was really good. I'd say I really had a lot of fun with the podcast and reviewing some of those books. But I don't know, I was kind of thinking, we've got a little bit extra time here, so I was thinking top 3 reads for the month. I don't know, I'll go first, and I'll let you think about it. So I would say Clark Howard's Siberia 10, which I mentioned on the last episode. I think the review's out there on the site now. Love that book. A really unique military fiction book. Highly recommend it. The Sins of the Fathers, which is the debut of the iconic Matthew Scudder series by Lawrence Block. Reviewed it on the first episode of the show. Love that book. That makes my top 3. Another one that I haven't reviewed on the show, and maybe isn't even out there on Paperback Warrior yet, but a Western called Guild by Ed Gorman. And it was the first book in a short-lived series, which was just fantastic. And that reminds me, when I was talking about Guild with one of the group pages out there, they had mentioned that I should read his Wolf Moon novel. People claim it's great. I definitely need to read that one. I just found the paperback version of it at a used bookstore earlier this year. So have you read Wolf Moon?
I've not. Ed Gorman is he died just a couple of years ago. I think maybe 2016, could have been 2017. I'm pretty sure it was 2016. He was just such a great writer about the genre. He put together some fantastic anthologies. He had a blog about crime fiction and kind of vintage fiction, and he was one of the most insightful guys about this genre. In fact, I think his writing, as well as a guy named Bill Kreider, probably went farther toward influencing me to write about this genre and kind of shed light on this stuff so these books aren't forgotten. So Ed Gorman is a name that I hold in super high reverence, although I haven't read those particular Westerns you're referring to.
I see Gorman's name a lot, and I see Bill Pronzini on all those compilation books, and sort of like the historians of the genre.
Yeah, but we're like the next generation, Eric, you and I.
We are. Literature anthropologists.
Yeah, version 2.0.
Yes. Yeah. We pride ourselves on it.
Anyway, so what did I like in July? I love that Man from War book. I guess the 3 books I've reviewed so far from New Ebook Library, these 99-cent books that Ben Bridges is putting out. Man from War, number 1. There was a book called The Man All America Hated that I reviewed a week or 2 ago on the site. That was just a really cool lost novel. Of course, the author's name escapes me right now, but the gist was that there was a guy who became an international fugitive after World War II. Because he conspired with the Japanese as a traitor to torture American POWs. And then a plane crashes on an island, and it turns out that a bunch of people who are very familiar with the bad guy are trapped on an island with him now. He was making his escape, and so it becomes kind of an island hunting adventure, and it was just so much fun. There's also a series that's come out on New Ebook Library called the Rex Brandon series, which I think is probably a lot more like an Indiana Jones / Tarzan. The main character Rex Brandon is he's a adventurer and big game hunter who's constantly being hired to take somebody into the African jungles to recover some missionary who's missing or some pot of gold that's missing. And the books are incredibly politically incorrect by today's standards, and I think they were written in the 1950s. I believe it was a British series, so I don't even know if they had American publications until now. And real pulpy fiction, and but a lot of fun to read. And Rex Brandon number 1 was reviewed on the site. Just an absolutely terrific series that I'm excited to delve deeper into. And I think that's about it.
All right, well, that's the end. So again, thanks so much for listening. It's been a great month. We've enjoyed these 4 episodes. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. And again, the show episodes are available on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to subscribe there as well as YouTube. You'll find us on Spotify, Spreaker, and of course on our direct site, the flagship paperbackwarrior.com. You're going to find plenty of ways to contact us. Don't hesitate to drop us a line. We'd love to hear back from you. And let us know what books you want us to cover. You can send us an email as well at paperbackwarrior@yahoo.com. Thanks again for listening, and we're going to see you next time.
See you at the bookstore.
Bye-bye.